Welcome back to the Crypto Strategist, everyone. I'm really glad you're here because today's conversation is one that I believe every XRP holder needs to hear. We're going to slow everything down and look at the facts behind one of the biggest topics dominating the crypto world right now, the bold predictions that XRP could eventually reach $1,000. Everywhere you look, people are throwing around huge numbers, emotional headlines, and life-changing price targets. Some people are convinced that massive wealth is just around the corner, while others believe it's all unrealistic hype. Today, instead of choosing a side emotionally, we're going to separate excitement from evidence and look at what actually matters. A year from now, many people may look back at this exact period and wish they had understood what was happening instead of simply reacting to the daily price action. Right now, XRP doesn't feel exciting. The price isn't making headlines for explosive gains. The charts aren't giving investors much confidence, and social media is filled with frustration instead of celebration. But strangely enough, those are often the moments that deserve the closest attention. Before we dive deeper, I want to remind everyone that nothing in this video is financial advice. I'm simply sharing research, observations, and my own thoughts to help you think more clearly. Please always do your own research, protect your capital, and never invest money you cannot afford to lose. One of the biggest reasons everyone keeps talking about the coming months is because markets tend to move long before the average investor realizes something important is changing. People often expect excitement before prices rise, but history frequently shows the opposite. Major rallies usually begin when sentiment is still weak and confidence is still missing. That's why understanding today's environment matters much more than chasing tomorrow's headlines. Right now, fear dominates many conversations surrounding XRP. Investors are questioning whether the long legal battles are truly over, whether institutional adoption will accelerate, and whether the next bull market can deliver the explosive returns many have been waiting years to see. Those are fair questions. But the mistake many people make is confusing uncertainty with failure. Markets are built on uncertainty. If everyone already agreed that XRP was guaranteed to succeed, the opportunity would likely have disappeared long before the average investor arrived. That's why patience often feels uncomfortable. It asks you to believe in your own research while everyone else is focused on today's candles instead of tomorrow's possibilities. Let's also address something that deserves complete honesty. Many creators online throw around enormous XRP price targets because they know those numbers generate clicks. A headline promising $1,000 XRP attracts far more attention than one discussing realistic market structure or gradual adoption. That's simply how social media works. But just because a prediction gets millions of views doesn't automatically make it credible. There is an enormous difference between possibility and probability. Could XRP eventually experience dramatic growth if global financial infrastructure changes significantly over many years? That's one discussion. Is it guaranteed to happen because someone uploaded a thumbnail with rockets and dollar signs? That's something entirely different. Healthy investing requires separating emotional storytelling from measurable evidence. It's perfectly fine to be optimistic. Optimism drives innovation and long-term investing. But optimism becomes dangerous when it replaces critical thinking. Every prediction deserves to be questioned, analyzed, and tested against facts instead of simply accepted because it sounds exciting. Now let's talk about the word that has been everywhere lately: euphoria. Personally, I think it's one of the most misunderstood words in investing. People keep saying euphoria is just around the corner. But if you honestly examine today's market, does this really feel euphoric? XRP has experienced significant volatility. Many holders are still underwater from previous purchases. Fear continues to dominate many technical indicators, and social media is filled with disappointment rather than celebration. That's not what true market euphoria looks like. Real euphoria usually appears near the top of a cycle when everyone believes prices can only go higher. That's when caution becomes most valuable. Today's environment feels very different. It feels uncertain, quiet, frustrating, and emotionally exhausting. Ironically, those are exactly the emotions that often appear during accumulation periods rather than speculative peaks. That doesn't guarantee higher prices are coming, but it does remind us that emotions alone are terrible indicators of future market direction. Here's something many newer investors don't realize. The greatest opportunities rarely announce themselves with fireworks. They usually arrive quietly, while everyone is distracted by fear, boredom, or disappointment. Think about previous market cycles across different assets. When prices were collapsing, very few people wanted to buy. Confidence disappeared. News coverage became overwhelmingly negative. Yet those periods often created the strongest long-term returns for investors who remained patient and disciplined. Again, that doesn't mean every asset eventually recovers or reaches incredible new highs. Some never do. That's why research matters so much. But history repeatedly teaches us that emotional extremes often create distorted decision-making. When everyone feels unstoppable, risk is usually much higher than people realize. When everyone feels hopeless, opportunities sometimes become easier to find. Understanding that emotional cycle can completely change the way you approach investing, instead of constantly reacting to headlines designed to provoke either fear or greed. Now let's tackle the famous $1,000 XRP prediction directly. Can anyone honestly guarantee that XRP will reach that number? The answer is no. No serious analyst, economist, or financial professional can promise a future price with certainty. Markets simply don't work that way. Could extraordinary technological adoption, regulatory clarity, massive institutional demand, and decades of financial transformation create astonishing price appreciation? In theory, almost anything is possible over a long enough timeline. But possibility should never be confused with inevitability. Reaching extraordinary price levels would require extraordinary changes in adoption, liquidity, transaction demand, and the broader global financial system. Those are enormous assumptions that deserve careful analysis instead of emotional acceptance. Believing something because you hope it happens isn't investing, it's wishing. Real investing balances optimism with realism and excitement with evidence. One thing that deserves far more attention than flashy price predictions is utility. Why does XRP exist in the first place? That's the question investors should continue asking. If the technology solves real-world problems, supports faster settlements, reduces transaction costs, and becomes integrated into financial infrastructure, then adoption may naturally expand over time. If utility grows, demand could grow alongside it. That's a far healthier framework than focusing exclusively on price targets. Technologies create value when they solve meaningful problems consistently and efficiently. Speculation alone can drive temporary rallies, but sustainable long-term appreciation often depends on genuine usage. That's why many experienced investors spend less time obsessing over tomorrow's candle and more time studying partnerships, regulatory developments, payment infrastructure, and adoption trends. Those factors may ultimately matter much more than daily market noise. Another important lesson is understanding time. Many people enter crypto expecting overnight success because that's what social media constantly highlights. But meaningful wealth creation usually takes far longer than viral posts suggest. Every major investment story that looks obvious in hindsight was filled with uncertainty while it was unfolding. There were countless moments when believers questioned themselves. There were long periods where nothing seemed to happen. There were corrections, setbacks, negative headlines, and endless doubt. Patience isn't exciting. It doesn't generate millions of views. But patience has historically been one of the most valuable qualities investors can develop. Whether XRP ultimately succeeds beyond expectations or underperforms hopeful projections, emotional discipline will remain one of your greatest advantages. Markets constantly test conviction. They reward preparation far more often than impulsiveness. Let's also acknowledge something that's often overlooked. Not every investor has the same goals. Someone hoping to double their investment over several years approaches the market very differently from someone expecting immediate financial freedom. Those expectations shape every emotional reaction. Unrealistic expectations create unnecessary disappointment. Balanced expectations create clearer thinking. That's why defining your own investment thesis matters. Are you investing because you believe in blockchain infrastructure? Are you interested in international payments? Are you simply following social media trends? Your answer determines how you'll react during difficult periods. Without a personal framework, it's very easy to become emotionally controlled by every influencer, every rumor, and every dramatic headline that appears throughout the week. Whenever enormous predictions dominate conversations, it's also worth asking who benefits from those narratives. Sometimes predictions are made honestly by people sharing genuine opinions. Other times, exaggerated forecasts generate attention, followers, and advertising revenue. That's why independent thinking remains incredibly valuable. You don't need to reject every optimistic forecast, but you also don't need to accept every exciting claim without questioning it. Healthy skepticism protects investors from emotional manipulation. Good research includes both bullish and bearish viewpoints because reality is rarely one-sided. The strongest decisions usually come from understanding both opportunities and risks, instead of ignoring whichever side makes us uncomfortable. Another overlooked reality is that markets move in cycles, not straight lines. Even during strong bull markets, corrections happen. Momentum slows. Confidence disappears temporarily before returning again. Investors who expect perfect upward movement often become discouraged during completely normal market behavior. That's why zooming out is so important. Looking at daily price movements alone can create unnecessary anxiety. Long-term trends, technological development, regulatory progress, and institutional participation often tell a much bigger story than individual trading sessions. Keeping that broader perspective helps reduce emotional decision-making during volatile periods. One characteristic consistently separates long-term investors from those who eventually quit: emotional resilience. Successful investors aren't people who never experience fear. They're people who learn how to manage fear without allowing it to dictate every decision. They understand that uncertainty is permanent. They accept that predictions will frequently be wrong. They remain flexible enough to adjust their views when new evidence appears while avoiding emotional overreactions to temporary volatility. That mindset isn't glamorous, but it may be one of the greatest competitive advantages anyone can develop throughout their investment journey. As we look ahead, there are certainly reasons many XRP supporters remain optimistic. Continued regulatory clarity, expanding blockchain adoption, increasing institutional interest, cross-border payment innovation, and improvements throughout the broader digital asset ecosystem could all contribute positively over time. Those developments deserve attention because they're measurable, they're observable, they're based on real progress rather than pure speculation. At the same time, challenges still exist. Competition remains intense, regulations continue evolving, global economic conditions can change quickly. Investors should acknowledge both sides honestly because balanced thinking produces better decisions than blind confidence or constant pessimism. When people ask whether XRP will eventually reach extraordinary valuations, my response is simple. Nobody truly knows. Anyone claiming certainty is probably selling confidence more than facts. What we can do is continue studying adoption, technology, regulation, macroeconomic conditions, liquidity, and institutional behavior while remaining open to new information. That's a much healthier approach than becoming emotionally attached to any single prediction. Whether the future exceeds expectations or falls short, informed investors will always be in a stronger position than emotional speculators. As we wrap up today's discussion, I want you to remember one simple idea. The biggest difference between hype and facts isn't optimism versus pessimism, it's evidence versus assumption. Dreaming about extraordinary outcomes isn't wrong. In fact, ambitious thinking often drives innovation and long-term investing. But lasting success comes from combining hope with discipline, excitement with patience, and confidence with continuous learning. If 1 year from now people look back at this exact moment wishing they had paid closer attention, it probably won't be because someone guessed the perfect price target. It will be because they finally understood that successful investing has never been about chasing the loudest prediction. It's about making thoughtful decisions consistently while everyone else is distracted by emotional noise. Thank you so much for watching The Crypto Strategist. If you enjoyed today's discussion, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the biggest stories shaping the future of crypto. Until next time, stay informed, stay patient, and keep thinking for yourself.